A child can live 5 minutes from a good school and still be treated as though that school exists in another country. Sometimes the barrier is race, sometimes it is disability, poverty, religion, language, immigration, status, or the neighborhood assigned to that child. The school may also be close enough to see, but legally difficult to enter, financially impossible to afford, or quietly designed to keep certain families outside. Then, education gives us one of its favorite explanations. Those are the rules. But sometimes the rules are not always neutral. Sometimes the rule is simply an old injustice wearing an official uniform. More than 70 years ago, black families across the United States challenged rules that sent their children past nearby white schools to reach schools reserved for black children. Their struggle produced one of the most famous judgments in educational history, Brown versus Board of Education. But the popular version of that story is incomplete. Let's write it. Now, it was not only about Linda Brown, it actually did not begin with one father spontaneously walking into one school. And when the Supreme Court finally declared segregated education unconstitutional, black children did not simply enter previously white schools the following morning. The law changed. The school gates did not. Now, to understand why, let's travel back to an America where racial separation was not merely a social habit, it was supported by law. Yes, you heard me. In 1896, the United States Supreme Court had upheld the doctrine commonly described as separate but equal. So in Plessy, did I get it? What? in Plessy versus Ferguson, yes, I remember the case. In practice, separation was carefully enforced, while equality was treated as an optional extra. Black and white children could be assigned to different schools. Officials defended the arrangement by claiming that both groups were receiving an education. But calling two buildings schools did not make the experiences inside them equal. Many black children study in overcrowded classrooms with fewer materials, weaker facilities, and longer journeys. Some communities had school buses for white children while black children walked. Some white schools even had libraries, laboratories, cafeterias, and sports grounds that black schools did not. The inequality was not hiding. It was standing in full public view, ringing a school bell. In Clarendon County, that's South Carolina, the problem became impossible for families to ignore. Black children often traveled long distances to attend poorly resourced schools, while buses transported white children. So, the first request from black parents was not even a demand for integration. Reverend Joseph Delane and other community members supported a campaign asking for a school bus. You see, that request grew into Briggs versus Elliott, named for Harry Briggs, one of the parents. And 20 families signed the original petition challenging segregation. Signing was dangerous. Some petitioners lost their jobs. Some were denied credit. But Reverend Delane was dismissed from his teaching position, and his family faced violent retaliation. Challenging a school system could affect your employment, also your income, safety, and standing within the community. Now, this was not parents complaining at the school reception desk and returning home. No. They were confronting an entire racial order. Then came a challenge led by these students themselves. In Farmville, Virginia, a 16-year-old Barbara Jones attended Robert Russell Morton High School, an overcrowded school for black students. The building did not have enough space, so authorities added temporary structures covered with tar paper. In April 1951, Barbara helped organize a student strike. More than 400 students walked out demanding a better school. Now, think about that. 400 students. And one of the cases that helped change America constitutional law began because teenagers decided that adults had postponed justice for too long. The students contacted lawyers from the NAACP, and the lawyers agreed to help, but they wanted to challenge segregation itself, not merely ask the county to improve the black school. That resulting case became Davis versus County School Board of Prince Edward County. Can you see how many cases files we've opened so far? Now, in Washington, D.C., black families face another version of the same wall. A group of students attempted to enroll at the new John Phillips Social Junior High School, but were rejected because the school was reserved for white children. So their case became Bowling versus Sharp. In another county, another state. Right. Now, Washington presented a legal complication. The 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause applied to states, while the District of Columbia was governed federally. So the Supreme Court therefore decided Bowling separately, using the 5th Amendment's Due Process Clause to rule that segregation in Washington's public schools was unconstitutional. You see, different constitutional route, but same locked gate. Now, moving on to Delaware, families challenged conditions that forced black children to travel farther for education while white schools were nearby. Then comes Sarah Buller. She had asked for transportation for her daughter, Shirley. A school bus serving white children passed near their home, but Shirley was not permitted to ride it. In another Delaware case, Ethel Belton and other parents challenged the exclusion of black students from a better equipped high school. These cases became Bueller versus Gebhardt and Burton versus Gebhardt. Yeah. They were argued by Louis Redding, that Delaware's first black lawyer, and something unusual happened. The Delaware court ordered the black children admitted to the white schools. It was the only one of the 5 disputes in which the plaintiffs won an immediate order for admission before the cases reached the United States Supreme Court. Then there was the Picar in Kansas, the case that would lend its name to the entire legal battle involved 13 families and 20 children, not Linda Brown alone. Good. So the Topeka branch of the NAACP organized families to attempt to enroll their children in white neighborhood schools. And when the schools refused them, the families had the evidence needed to challenge the policy. Then Oliver Brown was one of the parents. His daughter, Linda, had to travel farther to attend Memorial Elementary at a black school, although another elementary school was much closer to her home. You see, the history is often retold as though Oliver Brown woke up one morning, took Linda by the hand, and personally invented the struggle against school segregation. The real story was larger and more organized. Oliver Brown's name appeared first partly because legal cases need names, and his surname, came early alphabetically among the Topeka's plaintiffs. So he was the only man among the named parents. But behind the title Brown versus Board of Education were mothers, were fathers, were clergy members, teachers, students, local organizers, and lawyers. Across the combined cases were more than 200 plaintiffs. So Linda Brown became the symbol. She was never the whole movement. So, the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, led by the Thurgood Marshall, brought the cases together as part of a much longer legal campaign against segregation. Lawyers including Robert Carter, Spotwood Robinson, Oliver Hill, Jack Greenberg, Louis Redding, and helped build and argue the challenges. So the cases came from Kansas, South Carolina, Virginia, Delaware, and Washington, D.C. That geography mattered. You see, segregated education could no longer be dismissed as one badly behaved southern district. It was a national symbol appearing in different forms. So on May 17, 1954, Chief Justice Earl Warren delivered the Supreme Court unanimous decision, and the court declared that separate educational facilities were inherently unequal. So segregating children in public schools solely because of race deprived black children of equal educational opportunity, even where buildings and other visible facilities appeared similar. You see, that sentence attacked the legal foundation of segregated public education. But the court did not immediately explain exactly how or when desegregation must occur. So, a second ruling followed in 1955, and it's known as Brown 2. It directed authorities to proceed with all deliberate speed. With all deliberate speed. So the phrase actually sounded responsible in the hands of resistant officials. However, deliberate became extremely busy while speed went missing. So there was no firm national deadline. Some districts delayed. Politicians organized what became known as massive resistance. Families faced intimidation. Black students entering formerly white schools encountered hostility and violence. So Prince Edward County, where Barbara Jones and her classmates had launched their strike, chose an especially brutal response. Local officials closed the county's public schools in 1959 rather than integrate them. I don't know what to call that. But the schools remained closed for 5 years. So white children could access private alternatives supported by tuition grants, but many black children were left without formal education. Well, the student had helped win Brown, right? Their own county answered by dismantling public education. That is why saying Brown ended school segregation can be misleading. Brown actually ended its constitutional legitimacy. It did not instantly end the behavior. It did not end the policies, the residential patterns, or political resistance that sustained it. The ruling was a breakthrough, not a magic spell. And this is where the story from 1954 walks into schools today. Imagine a school that announces an inclusive admissions policy but places children from poorer neighborhoods in a separate under-resourced stream. And the official rule says everyone is welcome. The timetable, teacher allocation, and learning opportunities tell a different story. Or imagine a child with a disability who has legally gained admission but cannot reach the classroom upstairs or access the learning materials or participate in assessment. The school can point to the child's name on the register. The child's daily experience still says, "You are outside." Access is not achieved merely because discrimination disappears from the policy document. Educators must examine who receives experienced teachers, advanced courses, safe facilities, technology, attention, and genuine expectations of success. School leaders must also look beyond enrollment numbers and ask whether children are being separated inside supposedly inclusive system. And talk about policymakers. They must ensure implementation, not merely celebrate legislation. Then the parent, they must also remember what the Brown families demonstrated, meaning what they did a nearby school is not truly public if certain children must fight to enter it. So Brown versus Board was bigger than one child because segregation was bigger than one school. It required families from different communities to reveal the same injustice from different angles. The South Carolina families exposed unequal resources and transportation. Barbara Jones and the Virginia students exposed overcrowding and official neglect. Then the Washington families exposed segregation under federal authority. Then the Delaware families, they showed the courts that court could order immediate admission. Don't forget the Topeka families. They challenged separation even where officials claimed the physical schools were comparatively similar. Together, they made one argument impossible to avoid. Separation imposed by race was itself a denial of equality. And perhaps that is the part of the story we should not ignore. Brown versus Board did not remain inside the courtroom. It entered constitutions, teachers training, programs, civil rights, campaigns, and school policies around the world. But as the story traveled, hundreds of plaintiffs were compressed into one child. Decades of organizing became one courtroom moment and an unfinished struggle that was packaged as a completed victory. So the question is no longer simply what Brown versus Board taught us. The deeper question here is this: where are the children still being told that they belong to the public, while the public system quietly keeps the best opportunities beyond their reach? A law can open a gate. Only people, policies, resources, and accountability can keep it open. So here's my question to you. So what other educational law have we celebrated before checking whether it changed the child's actual experience? I need you to share your thoughts in the comments and follow this page, Who Taught Education This? Because this is an educational documentary with your host, Tom Phonics. Because see, some of the rules controlling today's classrooms have history and unfinished promises we were never taught. So if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so. Subscribe, on your notification bell, and do not forget to comment. Let me hear from you, let me read from you, and share this to your educational community. I'll see you next time.